All of the above, Ryan Ray, alongside the good doctor herself, Dr. Ellen Wall. Miss Wall, how are you doing today?
Oh, things are very busy, but good.
It is a busy, busy time right now. A lot going on in the world. We have Dr. Dean Foreman, who will be joining us here in about 25, 30 minutes. So looking forward to getting to that. Let's start with some news that's kind of gaining steam now. Natural gas prices surge and winter is still months away. Like, I feel the internet collectively needs to break out the brace yourself, winter is coming, meme with the no natural gas or something, because this could be a problem.
Yeah, get your fur coats out.
Like,
So, because I mean, what am I saying? Like, I live in Florida. It's not gonna be that cold, but I would be getting my fur coat or your polyester, plastic, petroleum derivative coat, whatever it is, the cool kids are wearing these days.
yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
rely on that like natural hemp, linen, cotton blend.
Well, I would say I don't need a coat, but it gets cold here in Texas. The wind gets going
Oh,
as we
really? Oh, really? Did someone
speak.
have an interesting experience in Texas last year with the cold?
Yeah, I can't say that. I can't say that. It gets cold here in Texas. I don't know about Florida, but it gets cold here in Texas. So yeah, we need the natural gas.
Christmas Day was like below freezing here. I want to say below zero, but not below 0 Fahrenheit, below zero Celsius. It was, I mean, there was one Thanksgiving, it was the first Thanksgiving I lived here in North Florida. And we like walked outside and everything like smelled rotten because we'd had such a hard freeze the night before that all of the like plants died and then they were just rotting in the sun. It was gross. So that can happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but yeah.
So, I mean, we're at what 5:15. I haven't checked
Yeah.
exactly 5:15 this morning. I think. Where is this price going?
Yeah, see, I'm wondering how much of this is due to this kind of like global panic over natural gas and what's happening in Europe and speculators and, kind of saying like, oh my God, Europe doesn't have enough. Prices need to go up here. Are we moving towards a global natural gas market in a sense? Possibly, or at least like inching towards that. I guess that's kind of a question for another day, but or another time. But or are we actually facing serious issues in the United States? I would say I think that we're not like where Europe is. That's something else. But I mean, apparently, the stocks are down. Stocks, not stocks as in the stock market,
Yeah,
stores of natural
I'm
gas
sure, but yes.
are pretty low. Although we're going to get a new estimate of the volume of natural gas in storage on Thursday. The last so that will be for last week. The what we got previously, it says that we're at 16.5% less than a year ago. So I'm not. I mean, is that really like cause to panic? It says now is the time of year when drillers fill storage tanks and caverns to get through the winter, when demand is greatest and households are most exposed. Yes, that's true. So, but then okay, see, I have an issue with this. It says crude prices haven't warranted much new drilling, which has cut down the amount of gas produced as byproduct. Okay, true, but not really true because the crude prices actually have warranted new drilling. They just haven't been drilling. That doesn't mean the crude prices have for sure warranted it. Like if you could drill, you'd be making money.
Yeah, historically speaking, crude price warrants new drilling, right? So that's
Yeah.
what we're warning is if this was 2019 and I were telling you that WTI was at 70 and natural gas was at 5, the stories about pipelines being built, there would be no flaring going on, none of that. I mean, you're talking about these companies have been making money hand over fist, and yet now they're sitting there going, okay, what are we going to do? We're not really sure.
I mean, how much of this is the same? Like, I mean, it cannot be this like capital discipline. I mean, like if you were a serious investor in one of these oil companies, wouldn't you be calling up being like, drill, baby, drill? Like there's money to be made here. Take it. Like what are they doing with their cash? Like where are they putting it? I hope they're not putting it in the Chinese real estate market. But like, I mean, or is it just like, if we drill and we produce more natural gas, the government's going to hit us with a crap load of like fines and regulations because like we can't we won't be able to like flare it, or we might fall foul of like some little leak somewhere. I mean, is that it?
I I think they can't get the money. I think they're struggling to get money. I mean,
Hmm.
when you see people, I'm trying to think of who I saw this weekend, and they were saying that they had a viable project, it looked really good. The money was just like, nope, we're not interested, just not interested. And it's like,
Why?
yeah, I know, and it's not even a big project. This was just a smaller one, and it's like, no, we're it's just all of
I
that.
want
Yeah,
to know if you're a investor in this stuff. Like, come tell us why aren't you interested? Because especially if you want to sell that natural gas to Europe, I mean, like, come on.
right. The other thing I think to watch is we got the big Pioneer sale going on.
Mhm.
How fast does that sell? Right, if that sits out there for a long period of time and they don't get their $2 billion,
Hmm.
that tells you there's not a lot of money. But if it goes quick and a big company buys it, that's a good sign that maybe things will turn around. You got to think prior to COVID, we were in a situation to where Chevron got paid $1 billion to not buy Anadarko by Oxy. Like
Hmm.
that's not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
2018, 29, that was 2019 maybe. It wasn't that long ago, and now you got a $2 billion asset being put up by Pioneer. I'm curious just to see what happens with that. If it takes forever to unload that asset, it could just be a bad asset, um, but if it moves quickly, I think that's a sign that maybe things will turn around in the U.S.
Hmm.
a little bit quicker. But I don't know. That's just my guess. I don't know if you have a read on that or not.
I don't. I think it's a really interesting thing, and I'd like to keep an eye on it. I'm not totally. I really don't. I do have one other question though, which is, eh, can any of this, or at least the prices in the U.S., be blamed on? Can it be blamed on Hurricane Ida? Because I know that most of the oil stuff is back online, but the natural gas has been taking longer. And how much natural gas is produced in the Gulf, and can any of this be blamed on it? And then another question is like, what about the pipeline situation? Has that? I mean, I know we talked in the winter. In the Northeast, they have serious bottleneck issues. Like, has any of that been resolved?
Well, guess what we have on Dr. Dean Foreman? I hope he's ready. I hope he's ready 'cause
I
we've got
know
a lot of natural gas questions.
we're gonna hit him with the natural gas questions.
I don't think we've asked a question about natural gas in like 3 years,
Yeah.
but we're gonna hit him up now. So I hope he's ready for that. Okay, let's see here. Oil falls as storm hit U.S. supply trickles back into market. Okay, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I,
oil's falling. Some people were saying oil should rise because they're going to have to turn to oil in Europe this winter because coal and natural gas are too expensive. Wouldn't it be interesting if but they can't burn crude, they got to burn like fuel oil. Wouldn't it be interesting if Europe starts burning fuel oil for electricity?
oh gosh.
Who had that on their bingo card for like oil prices in, December?
Well, I
Not
mean,
me.
yeah, I think what Goldman's saying 85 by the end of the year.
They've been saying 85 by the end of the year forever. If
Well,
they actually get to 85, I'll be convinced that they like did something to get that.
well, okay. So here's the question: between now and the end of the year, Um, I know we've talked about so let's go back to July or early August. And one of the things I said was I wanted to see what was going to happen with these college football games, these NFL games, and these stadiums are packed, right? If you have a good team, your stadium is packed. So I think that goes to show you that consumers, at least that are football fans, are not avoiding large crowds. So we had on Patrick DeHaan, and he talked about consumer sentiment in the South at least wasn't really deterred by COVID. It seems that these football games are showing us that people are willing to get out and take the COVID risk, right?
Yeah. If
And
there's
so,
really a risk,
you
let's
know,
put it that way.
the perceived risk, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, as we get into winter, it's going to take a huge shift in narrative to get people to quit going out and about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, except that, yeah, I feel like the Northeast is so traumatized that like see, I wonder what we'll see there. Like, is Penn State going to do this? Is good? Are they gonna curb attendance at their games? Of course, all that stuff's like outside in the cold. Does anyone have, excuse me, an indoor stadium?
Syracuse did or does, I believe. But so that's what I was going to ask you. So Penn State was one of the games I was thinking of. They had 110,000 plus there Saturday night, going crazy, hollering, yelling. Now that's when you think of the Northeast, you think of Pennsylvania. Is Penn State kind of a? Are you familiar enough with that area? Is it kind of outside of the Northeast or
Okay, Penn State's more like they're up. I mean, it's State College, so it's not Philadelphia, it's not Pittsburgh, but it's also a college town. But like the people who love Penn State, love Penn State. Like,
yeah. So they're going to come out regardless.
Nittany Lions. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now I didn't get to.
For those of our listeners who don't know, I grew up in Philadelphia, so
right.
Not an Eagles fan.
Not
an Eagles fan.
I didn't get to watch like Rutgers or something like that to see how those stadiums. But the Giants, have the Giants played at home yet?
Yep.
How was that stadium?
Packed, despite their abysmal performance.
Okay. So,
packed.
Right.
Yeah, and no restrictions. Apparently, the biggest issue was like you had needed some like new parking pass, and there was a big like backup getting into the parking.
Right. So it seems like
it'd be better if they could play a little better.
Well, that would be nice. But however the demand is going, or when you have the seasonality change for summer driving season, that there's a certain segment of the population that's just going to get out, and it's going to take a ton of bad news to stop those people from getting out, or restrictions that prevent them. Right?
Yeah. What about like what if they put what if they have a vaccine requirement for domestic air travel? That could kill domestic air travel.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So the sentiment, the narrative can't change. It would have to be some kind of mandate that would stifle the economy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now I wouldn't put it past anyone to do that, but yeah, it would have to be a mandate.
Oh, I wouldn't either. No, I wouldn't either. But going back to what started, which was oil going to 85. Right now, there's nothing barring some kind of government mandate that slows us down to really make you think that demand will fall off as we go into the winter.
Yeah, I mean, other than like, okay, what if like New York and Massachusetts and New Jersey and all these places have a wave like Florida and Texas did in the summer, and the media is like, everyone's dying of COVID, the hospitals are overfull, they fired all the people who wouldn't take the vaccine, so that's like, they're like, it's a plague, everyone's dying. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. It's all about what the media says. And they're like, no, don't go to your family for Thanksgiving. Don't do this. Don't do that. Close school. I mean, if they close the schools or they start shutting down schools, even for like, say they decide to close schools for the period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I mean, is that enough of a message? Is it everyone just going to take their kids like to the mall and do a lot of Christmas shopping? Or is everyone going to sit home and order on Amazon and like not go out? Or alternatively, we could see like really big inflation that really starts to actually hurt consumer confidence, and people stay home and don't do things simply because they have a very poor economic outlook and they're concerned about spending money.
So I agree that a change in policy would be detrimental. The inflation thing I have wondered about. How much will that hurt? Because when the Black Friday numbers come out, if they're really low or stuff like that, that might change stuff. And of course, you'll have travel home for Christmas and whatnot. And I talked to a guy just the other day, and he said he hadn't seen his grandkids in 2 years. And I was like, wow, I
haven't seen my niece and nephew since the summer of 2019.
Wow.
When they were like 2 and now they're 4.
Wow. Okay.
So
maybe some of that pent up demand will come through this holiday season. Okay, let's see a couple more stories for Equinor to pump up gas supplies for tight European market. There's the answer. The Norwegians are going to
Norwegians to the rescue. Yeah. Apparently Gazprom is not coming to the rescue, as they said. They're like, we are not increasing our supply in September or October. The question is this enough? Can Norway save the day? And if certainly this announcement didn't help electricity prices. It's like they reached new highs today in Britain. So
you talk about inflation, though. Just think about this. Those prices in Europe are going to have an impact at some point, right?
Yeah. Well, our next article, we can kind of combine things, is actually about a trade group in the US that wants the US to restrict US natural gas exports because this is a manufacturers trade group, the Industrial Energy Consumers of America, which is like a really awful acronym, IECA, but kind of a cool name. Apparently, it's a group that represents chemical, food, and materials manufacturers, all things that use energy and feedstock and energy feedstocks and stuff. They say that they want the Department of Energy to restrict LNG exports because they are concerned that that prices will go up. So this is U.S. prices would have to increase to 10 per million BTU. Right now, $10. Now they're about 5 to provide incentive for producers to pump more gas and bring stocks back to historic levels. So that's kind of interesting. That's their call about the money. I'm wondering maybe we should ask Dean Foreman what he thinks if the price doubled, would that actually encourage more? But they said that so stockpiles are 7% below the 5-year average for this time. And I guess they're really concerned that like their chemical and stuff, they're not going to have enough feedstock, or it's just going to be so expensive. I mean, if you have to pay double what you did to get feed, that's going to cause the price of everything to go up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
I'm not sure that restricting LNG exports is the answer, though.
Well, a lot of those contracts are long term, so I don't know. I'm sure they have the spot market works a little different, but they have a lot of long term contracts. Remember, we had a story like 2 years ago, last year, that a third of all the contracts were up or something in the world.
Yeah.
But okay, here is the issue with this kind of narrative. On one hand, people will get mad at the Europeans for using Russia for gas, right? And then on the other hand, they'll say we don't want to sell to them. And then the next day, you'll have someone arguing that Russia is a huge threat to national security. And then we'll say, well, we should subsidize the gas to Europeans. It's like, you've got to get the narrative straight. What is our,
Yeah.
are we a capitalistic country, or are we not? And to be clear, it's more expensive for the Europeans to buy the product from us unless we're subsidizing it somehow. So they're paying more to buy it from us than they are from the Russians. And so what that should mean is that it's cheaper for the American companies to buy it than it is for the Europeans. So we should be able to buy all that we want at the right price and then sell the more expensive stuff to the Europeans, right? Like that's how that should work.
Yeah, it's all like, I'm not convinced that this is like the right answer here. But I do think it's an important point to consider that, that we're not just talking about natural gas for electricity and for heating. We're also talking about the fact that we use natural gas for a whole host of things. And if even if there isn't a technical shortage, even if just it's a tighter market, then that's going to cause the prices of everything basically to go up. I mean, they're talking about how we don't have enough propane, and propane stores are low, and that's going to cause the price of like chicken to go up because they use propane to heat like chicken coops.
Well, perhaps we should drill a few more wells and lower the restrictions.
I mean, this is like, I mean, the government could do things. I think really that if the government incentivized this and did more than just like did a lease auction, but if they actually were like, okay, we really do need more natural gas, like, and actually did things to promote that, even in sentiment, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw at least some investors returning.
Yeah, they're going to have to do something because, to your point about inflation, if prices continue to climb, there will have to be some kind of narrative shift. Of course, we could just vote to tax the rich, but whatever. Okay.
I mean, we could like build more nuclear, but that's not going to do anything this year.
Well, yeah, let's not get carried away now. Good ideas.
I know.
Okay. Old Giant Shell sets sight on sustainable aviation fuel takeoff. These headlines sometimes. I got to talk to these headline writers. Royal Dutch Shell plans to start producing low-carbon jet fuel at scale by 2025. Okay.
It's my favorite thing is when we talk about putting food in our airplanes and cars.
Listen, can we just all agree here that if your truck breaks down, it's bad, but you just pull off the side of the road, you get the wrecker, you go home. If the plane breaks down, it's not good. Like, I'm not, can we just leave the airplanes as whatever mission levels they are? I'm not, I'm not really wanting to jack with the jet fuel.
I just find that it constantly amazes me. Like, why do people want to keep putting food in their cars? I understand you need some ethanol because we don't want to use MBTE because that causes cancer. Fine. Okay. But like, why do you want to put more than you need? Like, do you not know where food comes? Like, food is not a renewable resource, really. Like, food depends on like this kind of scale means mass like industrial agriculture, and that is not good for the environment. It also requires fertilizer, which is made from petrochemicals, so it does terrible things with like water and water run. I mean, like, it's not free. So like soybeans and corn, it's not free. The algae thing I kind of get. Like, algae's gross. Algae grows like everywhere. I mean, we get algae blooms here all the time. Like, okay, fine. Also, though, algae is helped by fertilizer, but like, fine. We're not like, well, I guess some people they try to make food from algae. I don't know, whatever. But like, why do you want to put food? Cars aren't people. We burn calories. Cars don't need calories. Like, find another source of energy. I'm just like it. I don't know. I just like can't fathom like why people continue to think that this is a good thing to pursue.
Especially when you have mass poverty across the world with people barely making ends meet and being able to eat. Like, it's like, okay, if you want to subsidize or something, let's at least give it to people who are starving or on the threshold of starvation, because you could make food for them.
Is this like a really like cheap? Like, how much money are they actually investing here? Like, I'm wondering. Like, this could be just like a cheap throwaway thing. They're like, yeah, we'll do a little bit of this stuff and
Well,
try to put it in your airplane.
that's,
It's
that's what I'm saying.
actually they want.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said that's why I don't know. So I am not an ethanol guru. I just know that folks claim that it's not good for engine long term use, especially if there's too much.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know how it works on a plane engine, because those are a lot more sophisticated. But that was kind of what I was joking about earlier. It's like, before we start putting this stuff into the planes, let's make sure it works. But beyond that, to your point, we talked about jet fuel demand. What's Dr. Foreman says, like 8% of the use is like jet fuel demand globally, something like
I
that,
think.
right? Yeah. So that's a significant amount of crops that will have to be grown that could be made to use to feed people, or
Mm-hmm.
to build trees, to grow trees on, to build houses, or whatever else you want to use it for, that you're going to take to put into an airplane. Like, it just does not make sense as the best use of our, as our farmlands. A, B, to your point about making money, they're probably getting a huge tax write off.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. It just really bugs me that like people still think that this is like the thing to do after all of the like crap we've gone through with ethanol. Anyway, do we have time to talk about China?
Yeah, let's talk about China. Go ahead.
Let's talk about China.
Give us your China rant real quick before Dr.
Yeah. Okay. So this China thing is, I kind of fell down a little wormhole looking at what's going on with China. So this real estate group can't. It's gonna like go under. It can't. It's on the brink of skipping payments due to banks, and it's caused huge sell-off. And apparently, it's causing some market reverberations around the world. The Dow was down like 500 points today. And so like the big question is like, is this a Lehman moment or is this an LTCM moment? Lehman being like, is it going to collapse and cause like a major recession in China and could have global impacts all over, like global recession type things? Or is it more like long-term capital management, which was like kind of a blip and we got over it? And then I think, so like, I don't know, I've seen both. Like, I think part of the question has to do with government intervention in terms of LTCM. The government intervened with Lehman Brothers. They let it fail. But like, what's China going to do? And like, I know like when after Lehman Brothers, and then we had the whole financial crisis, there was a lot of debate when the government kind of bailed out these companies and ended up owning shares in them. There's a lot of debate over whether this is something like the U.S. government can do, should do, is it an appropriate thing to do. At least that was when I was working on my dissertation, and like that informed a lot of my thinking about the relationship between government and business, which was something that I was very interested in and wrote about at the time. I'm kind of wondering, like, does any of that apply in the case of China, and what is your read?
Yeah, China's going to do whatever they need to do to make this prop up longer. Dr. Foreman's in the green room, so real quick,
Okay.
couple things. One, everyone, if you have HBO Max, go watch the documentary In the Same Breath. It's fantastic. Kind of gives you a behind the scenes picture of on the ground in China. But two, um, I don't think you can negate or separate this story from like the Taiwan stuff, right? And so they have all
Hmm.
this stuff about they might invade Taiwan, they might bomb Taiwan. Oh, by the way, their economy is crumbling, right? And so they are always trying to distract from what's really going on. And so it would
Oh.
try to be the Taiwan stuff as a diversion from a crumbling economy. Okay. All right. Let's bring on Dr. Foreman. There he is. Can you hear us, Dr. Foreman?
I can hear you great. How are you?
Well, we are good. We hope that you are prepared for natural gas because we were talking earlier. I don't think we've ever asked you about natural gas, but today is the day we're going natural gas.
Good.
You have sent out your monthly and quarterly statistical report that they will be published on the 22nd. So I guess in 2 days, they will go out. Let's start quarterly. Let's start with natural gas. We were talking about it earlier. It's 5.15 or whatever it is right now. What is your guys' assessment of the storage of natural gas and what's going on in the market?
Well, there's a global issue and there's a U.S. issue, and we've got multiple layers of the onion we can peel back here. But let's start with the global one. For this time of year, we've never had higher prices. So if you're looking at Netherlands TTF at $25 per million BTU spot, looking out the window the last day or so, Asian prices, sometimes you're accustomed during the winter months of seeing a cold spike produce spot cargoes going to Korea or Japan that are in this kind of price range, but never this time of year on a global basis, and especially European prices going there. And it reflects a couple of things. One is that Russian gas inventories are critically low. Second, the renewable sources that Europe's been promoting, wind in particular, have really underperformed. So they're not getting nearly the rated capacity out of it. So gas is absolutely necessary to avoid brownouts at this point. LNG is the most ready source, and the cargoes are being snapped up, hoping that they have enough to stock up for winter. So the relative prices, we've seen basically a doubling year on year of spot prices in the United States. So this time last year, 220 per million BTU. Last couple of days, we're looking, 550, 560 per million BTU. And with that relative pricing globally to domestically produces a huge pull for LNG exports from the United States. So we've hit record amounts of just utilizing the terminal capacity that's come on stream. Off it goes, and it's supplying global markets, but it's still relatively nascent compared to oil as a globally traded commodity.
That was actually my next question was, do you think we're moving towards a global natural gas market? So you kind of jumped the gun on that.
It's such a small volume compared to global gas. You're still talking less than 20% that's getting traded interregionally. So it's hard to connect the prices and really get a transportation cost differential between them like you do with liquids. With gas, we have just a huge difference. And there's no question that if the gas is available, you could produce it for a lot less than $25 per million BTU in either Europe or Asia, but it's just in short supply right now. So there's a rush to get the cargoes that are available, and that's what's happening. On the domestic side, though, it really bifurcates the industry, and we haven't seen this before. So if you look at the drilling activity for natural gas, from Baker Hughes reported rig counts, they've actually gone down for gas in the last couple of weeks, despite the fact that we've got 550 per million BTU spot. Well, any assessment from BTU Analytics or other sources of what it requires to at least break even in drilling a new well should say that at recent market prices for both natural gas and for crude oil, that you should be able to drill all day and make money. So there are a couple of issues here. One is that you've got a set of producers on the Gulf Coast that have access through the value chain to premium markets, and have the ability to export. And on the other hand, you have those in, say, Appalachia, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, that don't have nearly as much access to global markets and are primarily responding to a much slower growing domestic market where more than 4 billion cubic feet per day has been just backed out of the power sector at these relatively higher prices. So far this year, those are EIA's estimates. So with that, you've got a two-speed market. You've got those that are playing with the global value chain and those that are really responding to a somewhat constrained domestic market here.
Ryan, you're muted.
Still can't hear you, Ryan.
Okay, while Ryan figures that out, I will go ahead and ask another question. So one of the interesting things that we were talking about is that apparently a trade group for chemicals and materials and other manufacturers has asked or is asking the Department of Energy to place a limit on LNG exports because they don't think that we will see more natural gas drilling unless the price hits $10 per million BTU. And I was curious what your thoughts were on either that price point or do you think that that's a realistic way to try to kind of curb the U.S. market?
With our outlook 3 months ago, the one back in June, one of the concerns that we expressed was that eventually the rise in prices with the lack of drilling activity and investment compared to demand having come back for both oil and gas would start to create this backlash where people would start to blame exports for the higher prices. Now, many of these projects, especially if you're going to build a $5 or $10 billion LNG export terminal, you don't finance that based on planning on taking all your gas off the spot market. You just don't do it. You have to beget your own production. So it motivates production and reserves adds that otherwise probably never would have happened. The Haynesville is a great example. So this is the production area in East Texas and Louisiana, which is much stronger in terms of drilling activity than it has been before we had LNG exports. So that's a great example where it really does. But on the margin, there's some that is coming from spot markets, no question about it. And it is creating this pressure. And there's no question that people are going to seek to place blame. Consumers are going to be angry because coming into winter, natural gas prices are at the highest level, really, it was since 2014, but it's really now going back to 2008 for September. So before, we've basically rolled back prices to before the energy revolution. So it's like, where's the benefit coming from now? And the benefit of the energy revolution is really in having this abundant domestic supply that helps keep downward pressure on prices. And we're just lacking that on both the oil and the gas side right now. So it really is a curious issue. I can't say from a manufacturer standpoint, if I were putting myself in their shoes, I'd seek to place blame. There's no magic price that goes with that, by the way. And right now, you should be able to drill profitably in every major oil and gas producing basin at recent prices at $550 per million BTU on average. So the question is, what's the cause of this lack of drilling responsiveness? And if you look at EIA's modeling, for example, they've assumed a pretty healthy drilling response to go with these prices, and it's just not coming to pass. It's not come to pass, at least so far. That could change, but we continue to have financial constraints in the industry where many took on debt just to survive last year and really need to right the ship on, so to speak, on their balance sheet before they invest to grow. You have investor pressure for continued profitable growth and capital discipline. That's what's being rewarded by investment banks right now. You have supply chain issues. You have workforce issues. You have a risk tolerance issue of just, do you believe that these prices will sustain over 1 to 3 years where you're willing to sign up for a rig? And lastly, and not least, but last, we have the policy environment really piling on here, saying, we had the Biden administration 2 weeks ago saying that they think they could get 50% of U.S. electricity from solar within 9 years. So if you're really going in on renewables and saying, look, you don't want room for natural gas, you want to promote a clean energy standard that would squeeze natural gas out of the market, it's really hard to get people to make long-lived investments on that basis.
I was going to say, are they planning on stopping the sun in its tracks so that we will have 24 hours of daylight in order to get all that solar energy?
Okay, is my mic working? My back?
Yes. You're
Oh, no,
back. You're not. We can't see your face, but we
my
hear you.
camera died. My camera died. But okay. What I was going to ask about was pipeline capacity.
Okay.
That was a problem we talked about, for a while. That especially for oil, there was natural gas. We should be drilling. And if you think about the Permian wells, where you might have a 70-30 oil to gas, you should be able to drill, be profitable on the oil, but also profitable on the gas. Is pipeline capacity the issue right now?
No, it really isn't. Don't get me wrong, there are still localized issues where you could use more, and if you had more, you'd reduce some flaring in the Permian. From an Appalachian standpoint, you could say on the margin that if you're going to make long-lived investments, you would probably like to have more transparency and clarity and predictability in permitting and building more pipeline capacity. So from our June outlook, we had showed that the Appalachian region from a natural gas perspective was probably good for about another year worth of growth. But after that, it really looked like they needed more pipe. And with the cancellation of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, plus others under pressure, it's created the need to have more in the long run. So these things don't magically happen. The incentives, we can look at the economics of the resource and say the rocks look good, the economics look good, but you have to have infrastructure to enable it.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. I want to kind of maybe just go over some of the numbers from the monthly statistical report in terms of demand. We've talked about how summer driving demand was really quite high, but maybe you could just break down a few of the numbers, both in terms of gasoline and jet fuel and also distillate.
So 21.3 million barrels per day of U.S. petroleum demand in August. Take that in, because this is actually higher than where it was in 2019. So, forget 2020. If we go back to 2019, 2 years, it's come back. So this says that, from an economic recovery and hand in hand with that oil demand perspective, fuels may have switched around, but the aggregate amount of demand has been pretty solid. So this has been, summer driving pushing the highest gasoline demand that we've seen in 2 years. It's trucking driving strong distillate demand and the shift towards online retailing, being more freight transportation along the way. Air travel this summer, and you could argue how much of that is pent up demand for air travel as a result. Certainly there's less international travel than there was a couple of years ago. And if you're looking at aggregate, you're still like 20% below where you were in 2019 from an air travel perspective. But no question, it's contributed positively. And then quietly, these other oils, these intermediate products that we've continued to highlight through the monthly statistical reports. So this is naphtha and gas oil going into refining and petrochemicals. It's propane and propylene and derivatives as well. These things, historically, the last several years have been about a quarter of U.S. petroleum demand. Thanks to COVID and the need for medical plastics, sterile packaging, that's continued to accelerate. Earlier this year, it was over 30% of U.S. petroleum demand. And even this last month, in August, the data say it was just under 28%. So that's continued to grow solidly. Any notion that this would be seasonal or would recede quickly with COVID doesn't appear the case.
That's very interesting. Brian, did you have anything you want to?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm over here in the dark. Can't see me. Okay. Yeah. So you talked about on the monthly statistical report. It says the highest gasoline prices for August since 2014. And then on the quarterly outlook, you have a note that says that price inflation is expected to return to pre-pandemic ranges in most countries in 2022, though uncertainty remains high. I don't. Wow, like it feels like we're going to be in this state of high inflationary prices for some time. What are you guys seeing, or what is being seen to change?
So the theme, as we've written it up for the quarterly outlook, really is one of divergences. And on one hand, it's demand coming back, yet with this record low of investment. And here with price inflation, we have a divergence between official estimates of broad consumer price inflation, which basically say things will remain in balance. And you can look at statements from the U.S. Federal Reserve. You can look at the Bank for International Settlements, the IMF, the World Bank, and pretty much all of them, whether they're in the weeds working papers that have gone into data-heavy analysis or just the official IMF high-level breakout by the world, advanced economies, developing economies. They basically say, look, it might be elevated a little bit this year and next, but it's not troublesome. And on that basis, that informs monetary policy. So let's take something like, Well, let's just take oil and gas prices. So if you take EIA's outlook and their short-term energy outlook, the price projections are not extraordinary, right? They would say if you go through 2022 and you have the US stepping up to produce 1.8 million barrels per day between the end of this quarter and the end of next year, with that contribution, they're projecting roughly $65 crude oil, Brent crude oil, between on an average over the next year. Nothing extraordinary, and actually lower than where we have been recently. So the question is, what's the missing piece here? And in their analysis, it's that drilling responsiveness. So ask yourself, when rigs have been going down, and a couple of weeks ago, we had a drop in 1 week of 16 rigs, the worst drop actually in a single week since June 2020. What are the odds that you're going to get 1.8 million barrels per day of US crude oil production growth between now and the end of 2022? And unless drilling activity picks up markedly, that would be very difficult to achieve. So the next thing we look at is producer price inflation. So sitting from the perspective of 5 different segments of our industry, from oil and gas extraction, natural gas liquids extraction, the refining sector, natural gas distribution, chemical manufacturing, and forget 2020, that would be an anomalous space year at this point, but go back to July of 2019, do a 2-year comparison. And for those 5 sectors, the price inflation on the input side coming in, this is both commodities, it's steel, it's wages, services, everything. For those 5 segments, the lower bound is 12%, the upper bound is 84% over 2 years. So let's acknowledge that producer price inflation tends to be more volatile and cyclical than broad consumer price inflation. But any way you stack it up over the last 30 years for 2-year changes, this is in the top 10%. It's among the highest price increases we've seen. And hence we've got a disconnect, right? We have official top-down estimates that are saying, no problem, price inflation looks like much of it will be temporary. And we can certainly come up with examples where it looks like prices should recede as supply chain issues, for example, get resolved. But yet, with oil and gas, my view is that there's a misunderstanding of the long lead nature of many of these investments, and that the fact that the proverbial damage is done here, in the sense that outside of the US, most of these conventional oil and gas projects take years to develop. And when they get delayed and canceled, you don't just flip a switch and have them come back on stream within 1 year to meet the demand that's come back so quickly along with the economy. So if the economy remains on track, we have some serious pressure both on the oil and the gas side going into next year. And I think price inflation broadly, having looked at different sources of this across different industries, not just our own, there are a lot of concerns whether this is the kind of thing, whether it's the construction sector where it might take 2 years on average to clear out some of these wage and supply chain issues that we're seeing. Wages and real estate prices, these, once they go up, tend to be sticky. So it's going to be very difficult when you take vehicles going up, housing going up, and healthcare and food and education have gone up. So across the board, it looks like price inflation could be problematic here.
Yeah. One more question for me here. It says that in 2022, U.S. liquid fuel consumption could exceed its 2019 levels per the EIA. It can't be true. I was told that the end of oil consumption was dead in 2019, 2020. And now the EIA is coming out saying that we might exceed it next year. Like that seems weird.
Latter half of next year, global projected highs for oil demand, no question about it. The International Energy Agency, Paris-based, tends to have a more bearish view on fossil fuels in general. They wouldn't agree with that necessarily, but the EIA's view, which takes a more business as usual approach to it, does show that. And it's pretty clear on the demand side that the elasticity, that sensitivity as the economy grows, it's continued to come back pretty strongly on both the oil and the natural gas side. But if supply can't keep up, this will create a disconnect. It could produce upward pressure on prices that in turn has a kickback effect and a repressive effect on demand growth. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, I tend to agree that the numbers economically are so scorching hot. I can't underscore this enough. 5% global growth this year, projected to be above average for growth, with $20 trillion worth of economic stimulus going in over the next 2 years. Can't spend it all, but that amount of stimulus historically has had an impact. And if the economy goes, even if it falls short, even if price inflation overshoots, the numbers in terms of economic growth are still really strong, and that solid correlation that goes back to oil and natural gas demand along with it tends to mean that you're going to have strong demand no matter what, even if there's some potholes along the way here.
Sounds like OPEC is going to have a lot to think about in the very near future.
I should think they would.
Yeah. Let's leave it at that. Let's talk about the industry outlook a little bit. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to mention about that? Oh, so I thought some of the key implications for Q3, where you mentioned that, I guess you went over some of this, but delays and cancellations, and it's going to take a considerable time to rebound. That we're having issues in terms of that. Maybe we could just look a little bit at capital expenditures in terms of industry segment, because it was kind of an interesting look.
Thanks.
And there's so much more happening in, upstream and in the global integrated than in everywhere else. I was wondering if you could say a little more about what are some of the implications for that.
So for the audience that doesn't have a chart in front of them, we track investment two ways, as a flow and as a stock. And the chart you're referring to is looking at the quarterly flow across different segments of our industry, where the vast majority of it, and these are global companies that are publicly listed, we survey some 200 of them and keep track of the capital expenditures over time. And the vast majority of this ends up being either upstream dedicated or global integrated that has a substantial upstream component. And if you were to compare this to the International Energy Agency's assessments of global energy investment, the top of this chart, the area stacking up all these sectors, would match very closely with IEA's history there. So drilling internationally ends up being really important. That's the message. But this last quarter, despite the fact, and the last quarter for which we have complete financial reporting is the second quarter now, but the prices went up, improved price environment, net income, cash flows improved, but yet the capital investments went down. And they went down to $37.4 billion for the quarter. That's the weakest single quarter on record, including the great financial crisis back in 2008 and 2009. Substantial disconnect where, and there's another chart in this pack that compares futures prices for Brent crude oil as a summary statistic, if you will, for investment, with domestic and international total drilling activity from Baker Hughes. And you see it tracks really well historically until you get to 2020, where starting in the middle of the year, the futures prices have been in a steady upward trend. But what's happened is the drilling activity has really been muted by comparison for the multiple reasons we talked about, from financial to workforce to supply chain and now policy issues. So that's the big disconnect between the investment side and the drilling side that we've seen right now. And I think actually that probably is the critical dial that you turn in any energy model to project what supply might be next year, as we're looking at these continued responsiveness to prices.
Okay, I know we're getting up against the clock here, Dr. Foreman. Anything else that you want to point out and tell people where they can get this report, which comes out on Thursday?
The only thing that we didn't discuss really is the relative domestic versus international prices. And it's interesting because it affects investment secondarily, where we've got much closer prices now, transportation-based cost differentials, where now that we've returned as the U.S. to be a net importer, and a highlight from the monthly sales report is that we've now been a petroleum net importer for 5 of the last 6 months, after in 2020 having been a net exporter for the first time in 58 years. So now that we're back to importing again, we're seeing our domestic prices bid up to import parity, and that affects all of the pipeline and processing and petrochemical and refining expansion investments that you'd otherwise see. So if you'd like more detail on this, more charts, more analysis, or to interact, please go to api.org. In the upper right-hand section of the main page is a chief economist section to link and dig in. We've got data visualization, and all these reports are available.
All right. Thank you again. It's always good to have you on. Looking forward to talking to you again next month to see where things are at. And, if we're not careful, we'll go back-to-back months talking about natural gas. So let's see how it goes. Dr. Foreman, as good as always. Talk soon.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.
Okay, once again, that is Dr. Dean Foreman. I am over here like Batman or something uncovered. But I was unmuted the first time. This was so crazy. I was unmuted and it wasn't working. I can't hear you. I was like, okay. And then I get that fixed and the camera dies. So it's the beauty of running it live. Okay, Dr. Wald, anything else before we get out of here today?
It's just, I feel like we've done a complete 180 whiplash from where we were last year in terms of what we're talking about. I mean, all of a sudden we're talking about are we going to have a major energy shortage?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, if you were Saudi Arabia, wouldn't you just be sitting back I think we beat that shell.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about this.
I don't know if you could see me. I'm doing the Dr. Evil.
I can see you. I can see you putting your hands together. Well, so did you see that Los Angeles County is banning drilling, basically? Or
Do they drill? Oh, well, yeah, of course they do. What am I talking about? The Brea tar pits.
Right.
Let's ban drilling. Let's ban nuclear. Let's ban electricity. Let's
well, those barrels have to come somewhere. Like when they leave Los Angeles, they have to come on the market somewhere. It's not like they get to disappear. And so
they're basically getting their electricity from coal plants in Wyoming.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, if your point about the Saudis is, if you're the Saudis, you gotta be sitting there going, "Oh, this is good. Y'all keep that ESG up."
Yeah.
Keep that ESG up. We'll
do you not remember before the most recent election? I was like, the Saudis and the Russians want Biden. Everyone was like, no. They love Trump. No, they want Biden. Case in point.
That's why you're the doctor. All right, we will be back.
I mean, I did say that.
You got it. Where will you be this week, Dr. Wald?
This week, later today, in about an hour and a half, I'm going to be on BBC World News talking about what else? The natural gas crisis. And later this week, I will be on investing.com.
All right. I will be on Inside the War Room. We have on Nicholas Bloom from Stanford, Patricia Farah, I think is how you say it, Farah from Cambridge. And we actually have on a guy, I don't know if you watch Netflix documentaries. I've been getting into them lately. This cat is one of those deep sea divers, and he went down there, and his umbilical cord that goes to the little tank got disconnected for 30 minutes. Yes.
How did he survive?
Tune in and find out.
Oh my gosh.
Or go watch the documentary on Netflix, which is probably
I may have to do that.
Anyways, so Inside the War Room podcast, be there all week. Dr. Wall will be back next week. Apologies to everyone. I had COVID, so I've been sick, so that's why we haven't had a show recently. But we will be back on regular schedule now. So
yes, we will.